Hey, Rob.
Hey, Lauren. Hey, everybody out there. Thanks for joining us. We know you've got so much on your plate. And in fact, today here on Practical Pet Business, we're going to talk about something that I think a lot of folks are trying to avoid, but feeling the pressure of. Lauren, the pressure of burnout amongst pet business owners and those in the pet industry really seems to be exponentially growing. It's always an issue, but it really seems to be hitting hard. I know I've had some really um, almost discouraging conversations with folks who are at their wits' end. So I am so happy that we have you because I know you've had to deal with this.
Because I had
Um,
burnout.
yeah. So, again, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you taking the time. And if you've got your story that you want to share with folks on how you're addressing burnout and other things, make sure you hit us up at practicalpetchat@gmail.com. But Lauren, let's kick things off and really talk about this because this seems to just be, an epidemic. And there were certain areas of the industry that I've always had concern about, but it just seems to be almost universal right now. I don't know what has
Yeah.
shifted.
Well, what shifted is, and this is for everybody that is going to hear this when I touch on it and not discuss it. It is on an upcoming episode. It has to do with, the lack of help that is available. Really qualified, impassioned, um, dedicated, committed help. So, owners already have a lot on their plate. I work with owners in different aspects of the industry now, whether it's distribution or brands or whatever. And these are people that are, great at juggling. They've got a lot to juggle. There's everything on their plate and then some. They're practically walking around carrying the whole buffet. Um, but everybody, it catches up with everybody at some point. And I'm seeing more and more and more people that are asking, about, so thinking about selling my business. Anybody know the best way to do that? And I'm like, oh God, no, that's, what's going on? And you get to the nitty gritty with them, and it comes back to the same things all the time. But, I'll use my situation as an example. Um, I was lucky. I had some really good help over the years. Good people that were all those things I mentioned. Um, I still hit burnout because what happens is the more successful a store becomes, the heavier the plate gets, the more that gets piled on. And it just becomes bigger, bigger, bigger. And that seems great, right? That's what you want as a business owner. You want it to become this great, positive, uh, really frequented, high uh, product turnover type of business. But from my point of view, part of what added to my burnout was that I was ordering from three distributors weekly and getting two orders from each one a week, not to mention all my external orders that I was placing. So I became an order maker. And the things that got me into the industry, I didn't have time for. The spending the time with clients and doing the consults and, having the just the conversations that I wanted to have without having to look at my watch and think, oh my gosh, I got to get this order in, kind of a thing. Um, I sold my store due, in fact, to a lot of the burnout, but I have to say, I had deep respect for the people who bought my store because I think they have a handle on controlling the burnout. The first time that I heard they were closing the store for a week to go on vacation, it took me a good couple of minutes to take my chin back up off the floor. And, because in my head was like, What do you mean you're taking a week off? How does it even work? What's going to happen? Aren't you worried about customers? Where are they going to go? What are they going to buy? What if they run out? There's not going to be anybody there for them. Don't you have anybody who can run it for you? I mean, there's all this going on in my head because
Right.
I would have never done that. That doesn't make me right because they said, "Oh, well, we've been telling people for weeks." And I'm thinking, but people don't listen. They're not going to remember and they're not going to realize it was that week. And, they're not, and I was worried about fallout and people being irritated, angry, that kind of stuff. I will say they have done it more than once and they are grounded and happy and not stressed when I talk to them. Their business is flourishing and their customers seem to be riding that with them and understanding that. So, maybe it's a timing thing. Maybe it's their particular ages. They just understand the value of balance, which, for people that, are older than they are, we're the nose to the grindstone, work as hard as you can, build it, build it, build it, build it, build it, and, be all things to as many people as possible for the sake of your business. And I admire it. I'm sort of stunned seeing it work. I think everybody has to decide that for themselves. If you're going to go on vacation, all you're going to do is worry about it and think about it. I'll give you an example. I was open every day, 7 days a week. I was there 7 days a week for years, 10 years before I wasn't there a day. Um, and I loved it. I mean, I loved my store. Um, But that's a lot on people. And when I wasn't there following that first 10 years, I was constantly on my phone and taking calls and being available and worried about this, worried about that, and the orders and, having to be there for when vendors call and all the other stuff. So it's really tough to find that balance. A friend of mine bought a vet clinic. He's a vet, bought a vet clinic from another vet friend of mine, and I introduced them. And one of the things I told him is don't be open on the weekend. It's going to be tempting. And he's a people pleaser. I said, but I'm just the best advice I can give you as my friend, don't be open on the weekends. 'Cause he's a vet, right? He doesn't necessarily have to be. He's not open on the weekends. He has caught grief from time to time because people want what they want when it's convenient for them. I had a client who said, I wish he was open on a Saturday. And I said, he's not. And I'm happy for him that he's not. I know, but it's just so inconvenient. And finally I said, listen, I'm the reason he's not open on a Saturday because I told him not to be. She goes, why would you do that? I said, you love him. He's a great vet, right? She goes, yes. I said, you drive a distance to see him, right? She goes, yes. I said, it's not worth taking half a day from work, PTO or whatever, to take your kid to the vet to get this great vet that is amazing and not burn him out. And she said, well, I didn't look at it that way. Well, of course you didn't.
Right.
People want what they want when it's convenient for them. I was open until 7 o'clock at night and never closed early, never opened late. And I would hear about other businesses in the area that would close 5 minutes early. And people would come in and they'd be ranting and raving about it. I can't believe they closed early. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not the end of the world. I know, but I drove and blah blah. It's you're in a weird position as an owner to you have to worry constantly about negative fallout. So for everybody, it's going to be somewhat different. But I think if you plan early on for what it's going to be, it's much easier because when I stopped being open, like I was open 7 days a week and then I adjusted the hours, then I stopped being open on Sundays, and then I cut back an hour on weekdays because an hour for consumers is like, what's the difference? And for an owner, it's like, oh, it's 6 extra hours. What do you
Yeah.
mean? That's a lot. And not being open on a Sunday because having a day off, where you don't have to worry about something at the store. And so I think that people really have to build it in. And if you're going to make the changes, plan them out, do them ahead of time so that you plan it the right way. You tell people in advance, you post it everywhere, you post it on the doors constantly, you let people know, you put flyers in their bags, everything that you can think of to do so that you can minimize the fallout. But you have to build in the time because it's not worth it. What I did when I started closing on Sundays, I started thinking about how much money I was losing. So I would
Mm,
look at what I normally made on a Sunday and then exponentially, how much money I'm losing until I realized that I was really making up for it Friday and Saturday and Monday.
yeah.
But, at first it's like, I can't believe I'm losing this much money. Maybe I don't need a day off because I'm sitting here stressing over how much money I'm losing. And then when I absolutely stopped and took a look at it, it's the same thing when you close on a holiday. It's fascinating. The holidays come the same every year, but that couple of days right before and the couple of days right after, it's madness in the store. And it's like nobody plans in advance, or they're worried they're going to be caught short, or maybe you're not going to reopen, or I don't know what's going through their head, but they want to come in and definitely stock up. And of course, there's always those people who just don't plan and they're angry because you're closed on Christmas. And they're like, well, I ran out of food. I was like, your failure to plan does not constitute an emergency on my part. And I've done everything I could to forewarn you for weeks ahead. Don't forget, Christmas comes every year. Don't forget, plan ahead. Um, but I really feel for business owners because I know what it's like to want to make sure that you maximize your business and your opportunities, but at the same time, that burnout is real. And do you
Right.
want to keep your business longer, or do you want to do a quick hit, get out, sell it, close it, whatever, and move on? Because that's kind of where you're at.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned too that if you're gonna shut down. Because that is something I see sadly where most people fail themselves. They shut down the store or their hours, but they're spending that shutdown day restocking, going over all the admin, doing still a lot of work. You've
Yep.
got to think of yourself as a teapot. You got to release that steam because that pressure is just getting there, getting there. And once it overflows, it's hard to put it back in. So I love that you called that out.
That's
And I think
hard though. That's
it
so
is very hard.
hard
It is very
because
hard.
as a business owner,
Yeah.
your mind's going on it all the time. I mean, it's, from the
Well, and
the moment
especially
you
because
wake up and
yeah, for
yeah,
so many people, this starts as a passion for it.
right.
And it's like one of those ones that always kills me is like, well, if you do something you love, you never work a day. No, you
Couldn't
work.
be further from the
You work.
truth. You work
Okay.
10 times
Because there,
harder.
right. And the minute you get paid for something, it's work because
Right.
there's at a minimum an expectation elevation. Well, I'm paying for something, I expect it to have some value, some worth, etc. Even if it's, and I'm a very creative person, I do a lot of artwork and all the rest of that. My kids do that. And it's funny, the minute you start doing something for somebody else versus just, I'm going to sit and create for myself. So it's the same thing. Your passion drove you in here. And let's not lose that. And I think all the things that you were just sharing really lean back to that of you've got to have that balance to keep any kind of passion in a positive sense. And another part of that is looking at the tools that are available, not separating, the staffing thing, which I agree. I mean, there's so many things we're going to be talking about that really build into this whole topic here. But I want to just also say we've never been in a better space with technology that can take things off of your plate if you're willing to learn it and put it to use to your benefit. I will say there's a lot of folks who get technology and it only complicates because they didn't take the time. They saw that top end value and that's where it stopped. It was like, well, I bought the best car out there according to the ads. Yeah, did you read the manual on how to use all those different things? It's crazy. I
No,
mean,
because I already know how to drive, but I
right?
got
And
all these bells and
well,
whistles I don't know how to use.
yeah, and I laugh too because listen, I've got tons of technology, and there are some things where I'll just say to my kid. I said to my daughter the other day, "Man, I need to send a text at a certain time. I just wish I could, write the text and have it go out the same way I do with Outlook, where I can write an email and schedule it to go out." And she walks over with the biggest Cheshire cat smile and, looks at me with those big eyes and goes, "Hey, Dad, can I see your phone?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Hi, Dad, this is how you can send a text delayed. Set the time." And she goes, "It's in your phone, Dad. It's already there."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Is that a new feature? Was that a system? I don't
No.
blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "No, I'm pretty sure since the beginning of time that existed. You just, as you like to say to us, Dad, didn't read the manual." And I'm like, "Damn it, she's right." Um, so it happens to all of us. But when you're looking for those, and these aren't shortcuts, these are ways to do it smarter, better, and you're paying for this stuff. So you've got expectations just like your customers have expectations. And the last thing, too, that I just really want to jump out on is you got to set boundaries. You talked about, hey, I'm going to take the day off. I can't spin out worrying about all the things that I may or may not have been doing. But it's also setting boundaries with your customers. I'm not going to take calls after a certain amount of time. That's my downtime to do with whatever I, deem. And it may be just nothing but sitting there. It may be I'm going to set limitations on, I like that you said too, the ordering and how that all works, because it is remarkable um, how people will have 22 different sources of things that they're putting on their shelves. And I'm like, wow, that's got to be really frustrating and
It's a
confusing.
lot.
That is, and then you've got to keep track of it. And when it comes in, did it get here the way that you thought, or did it come packaged differently or this or that? Folks, I'm going to tell you, working with the biggest of big in the pet industry, if you're an independent retailer, you need to get that mindset. You're going to do it my way that works for me, or I may not be able to continue. Now, let's be reasonable with the vendors here, right? But the way to approach that is, how are you doing that with these bigger folks? Use them. They're a source of information for you. So if you're working with this huge online retailer or this huge big box store, benefit from that, right? In other words, talk to that vendor and say, how are you shipping to them so that they know they're getting everything, and see if that works within your system, because they did that as a bigger company for a specific reason. And I got to be honest, it's not always about scale. It's about accountability and keeping things easy so they can get it done quickly. So build that into your processes as well. Use these vendors as a way to, how do I shorten my time frames? I've got to check off every single one of these. There are so many tools out there now, et cetera. Maybe it's time to invest in that, because if that frees up an hour a week, what could you do with 52 hours? Oh, wait, there's that week that Lorin was just talking about that these people shut down for. Communication. I love that you said that too. They communicated, you know, I think that's one of the things that the younger generations do much better than, I'll say, us wiser and more experienced generations. Um, but in this situation, they're a lot better. They'll say, we're taking time off because we're stressed. And I'll be like, well, I'm stressed all the time too. And they'll be like, great,
It's
take some
like,
time off.
so
Yeah,
you're a business
take some
owner,
time off, Rob.
so that's
Yeah,
normal.
yeah. And And so it's just so funny, those dynamics of interpretation. I recently attended um, something that was a national event here. And those of you who know me know my daughter is a theater arts kid. And she's in this unique program. They wrote, produced, and performed something that we all within the last 15 years have a tie into. Um, and my youngest said to me, "Hey, Dad, what'd you think of it?" And I was blown away. Not because my daughter was in it or these kids that I've gotten to know have built this out and all this. I told her I was blown away because I had to sit and shut up for 2 hours while I heard their perspective on an event that we all lived in. And their perspective had some things that were tremendously different than my perspective. And I was just so thankful because I hadn't thought of it that way. And so I share that to say to all of you, get different perspectives. Your way is working, but if it's leading you towards burnout at a rapid pace, you got to get some different perspectives, you know. And I love that, something I know both you and I have done for a number of folks, which is why we're doing this topic today. But from the standpoint of, it might just be those that are working for you, your customers. What's working, what's not working, because you may be busting your hump on something that everybody else is like, okay. And I see that when people say to me, I've got to grow, I've got to this, I've got to add that. And I'm like, why? Are your customers demanding that? Are they, like, oh, I really wish you did this? Well, I know there's some place here locally that's just killing it. So I need to be able to compete with them too. Because if they pivot, then blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, oh, you are maybe overthinking this. So getting perspectives and having perspectives, I, like you and I have talked about in the past, where you will visit stores as one of your pastimes, and I'm sure that Kelly loves that.
He
Oh,
does actually. He does.
well,
We go
because
in
Kelly's
there
got
and
that mentality. He
yeah,
does.
because we go in there and we look at, he was there with me. I mean, it wasn't it was my store, but it wouldn't have ever happened if he hadn't been involved, and certainly wouldn't be what it became without him. So he will go into stores with me,
Yeah,
and it's so interesting. He sees things I don't, and his perspective is
perspective.
different. Yeah,
Perspective.
and it's really neat because, when I walk in, I'm taking in so much about how it's laid out in the flow and whether or not it's welcoming and if it's bright, if it's well lit, and then I start taking into where the merchandise is, how it's merchandised, so much that I take it in and how it first hits me, and then I go in and I look at it individually. And I do it in pet store. I do it in every store I go into, but I do it in pet stores because that's my love,
Right.
and I lived it for so long. And I want to feel that. I'm happy. Even if I think, oh, that could probably be done different or whatever, they're expressing themselves. I'm happy in that environment to see how they put their stuff together. Um, but when we would go into those stores, you can tell the burnout.
Yeah.
It's not just in how you're communicated with, it's the feel of the store. It's whether or
Well,
not merchandise is turned. It's whether or not product is faced. It's whether or not the place is clean.
yeah.
Are the floors done? Is there a smell? Is there a layer of dust on the shelves? Are people just standing around looking at phones or, got ear pods in, whatever, and they're just there to be like, if you need me, I'm a body. So you can really tell burnout in a number of ways, and I feel bad.
Well, and I want to jump on that for a second, because that is for all of you listening going, this episode doesn't really apply to me. Those are your first signs when you're not doing the things that you just mentioned, turning the product, dusting, really kind of looking and going, what can I change? What can I do to brighten, make this a more inviting experience for my customers? Those are the first signs. That's where you're headed. And so I love that you called that out because you're right. I see that. And I'll think to myself exactly what you just said. Oof, yeah, these owners have probably gone through a lot and they've lost some of that passion that got
Hmm.
them first into this. I hope they still have some left because this is a great store. Darn, this is, you can see it.
I see
Um,
when people give up. We were in a store yesterday, not a pet store. We were in a store yesterday that we have gone in before. And every time we've gone in, I'm like, this is a bad vibe.
mm,
It's just the way the store is laid out. It just doesn't have it's not shoppable. It doesn't feel good. And part of it was the lighting. Part of it was the merchandising or lack thereof. That kind of thing. And it's just it wasn't somewhere that you'd really even think about spending money or shopping. It just, well, you walked in, you looked around, you walked out.
sure.
Yesterday, we walked in and there was a buzz. And because Kelly said we should go in there. And I was like, why? It's always got that vibe. He's like, let's go in there. I'm like, "Ugh." So we go in there and I could feel the buzz. And I'm like, what's going on? Something's going on. And I start paying attention and they're having a sale. I'm like, that's not enough. And so I'm lingering and I'm hovering, and there's one salesperson working, one. And I start to take everything in and I'm like, oh, they're closing.
Oh,
And
interesting.
Kelly
Okay.
goes, you think so? And I said, oh, yeah, they're closing. I bet you. And I finally hear somebody say something to the girl, and I didn't hear what the question was, but she goes, oh, yes, next Saturday is our last day.
Mm,
And I was
interesting.
like, oh, that is such a bummer because I don't want to see any retail store go out of business,
Yeah.
but it's the culling of the people who haven't got dialed in, I guess, or have lost the
You know
drive.
what? It's not even that because it's funny you said that. I was just with one of my daughters who's a very crafty person, and we went to a very huge, nationally known name, and they're closing. And so when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, I just was, and you're right. I just felt a profound sadness for everybody that was in there
Yeah,
because you still had these. I could not believe it. There was one person that would cut the materials,
right.
and and the line was like 10 people deep. And when my daughter's like, hey, I was like, do you really not like me that much? We're going to stand here for, how long to just wait for the one person? She had the best attitude. The people online were all chitter chattering and in a positive. That buzz that you were talking is so funny. Oh
Hmm.
my gosh. And we stood in line for an hour.
Yeah.
And
And
she
it's
had
like if you'd
all
have
the
had
great,
that buzz, yeah, if you'd have had
yeah,
that buzz sooner.
right. But it is that whole like, I mean, I was like, it's just, I felt exactly what you're saying. And I think that that's just such a good call out too. It's like there is an energy when things
Mhm.
are going right. And when things are off, that's going to happen, right? Everything's not vibrating at a
Sure.
frequency of positivity all the time. But if it's not happening too often, that's another great call out. And you'll see
Right.
that not just in your own feelings or your staff, but just in the customers themselves as well. It's always interesting to me when I would go to your store. I planned for extra time because it was a great experience. And people that were in the store, customers, would ask questions that I would learn from as you all would answer and interact. And then it'd be like, oh, that's something new. I haven't seen that. Let me, see what this is. And you all were always so great to be like, oh, yeah, that's so and so, or this and that. It was, I don't want to call it out as some experiential shopping, because that's not what you were about necessarily, but that's how I felt when I went to your store. And that's why I'd make the long drive to go to your
Well, we
store.
were involved. We were
Good.
involved.
Yeah.
We wanted to be involved with our clients. We wanted to be involved in their choices. We were respectful if they didn't want our involvement.
Yeah.
But we were 100% there for what's up,
Yeah.
and inviting whatever questions or, you know, and you'd have the clients that, because there are those people that are like, I don't want help. It's like, not a problem,
Right.
and you just sort of go on and do your thing and be right around where they're at. But you still have to create, we all have those days that it's like every customer comes in is either cranky, rude, hard to get along with. You can't make them happy. And by the end of the day, you're just exhausted because it's like, humanity sucks.
Yeah.
And if you get up the next day dreading humanity again, you're setting the tone. So
Yeah.
you go home, you have a glass of wine, you shake it off, and you get up the next day, take a deep breath, and it's a different day. And I've had those days that have turned into like three or four of those days. And it's like, really, what is wrong with everyone? Mercury in retrograde kind of thing. But it's like, okay, I can affect this to some degree. I can either succumb to it or I can help change it. And it's the same thing if you're talking about your own burnout. You can either
Yeah.
succumb to the burnout or you can put things into place and change it. Because if you continue on the burnout streak, you're going to be without a business anyway.
Love that. Yeah. That's such a great call out. All right. So at that, I don't want to burn out our audience. Um, we try and keep these business ones a little bit shorter because we know you've got a lot to do. Hopefully, you're listening as you're dusting and cleaning or whatever else, some downtime. Um, thank you all. Lauren and I know how hard it is to run a business and run a business on a positive basis takes more effort every day. So, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. If you've got something to share with the audience out there, send it to us, practicalpetchat@gmail.com. We're happy to share it out. Make sure you're sharing this out for those folks who maybe need to hear this. It's okay to experience these types of feelings. Let's just not let it get us to that burnout, shut it down point. Let's try and do something a little bit sooner. Lorin, thank you for sharing all that. I always love your transparency. I learn so much every time. And I just, on behalf of those who don't get to say it, thank you for
Oh
being a
my
beacon,
gosh.
everybody. Topics like this, it makes a difference. So thank you for making a difference. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Really appreciate all of you, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thanks, everybody.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.